Good evening and welcome to the Monday night edition of the People Show. I'm Mark Wallace, your host and facilitator, with you here on this last Monday of 2024. I certainly hope that you had a great Christmas, Kwanzaa, Hanukkah, all of those seasons that we celebrate together. And I certainly am very grateful that I get a chance to celebrate um, and reflect with people from both communities that I have had the privilege of being able and honored to work with, both in the Jewish community, the Christian community, and all of the communities that there are. But I've particularly had a very interesting upbringing, and I don't consider it to be by any accident whatsoever. But I celebrate all of this, and I've really come to terms with this in 2024 that we are dealt a path, and much of that path that intersects our lives with different peoples and from different communities, backgrounds that are very different from ours, that based on secular opinions, right, that we would, in more cases than not, just kind of discount. But I don't discount any interaction or any intersection of life that I have. At this stage of my life, I appreciate every intersection that God has brought me to. Some intersections are like with other people, are just like you driving in a car. You may not think about this, but if you're a driver, or even if you're traveling on public transportation, you pass by people, millions of people in your lifetime that you will never come in contact with. That's called an intersection. But you're passing at an intersection. You'll never see those people again in your life. So you pass by millions of people, not even giving it a thought, that every day you make passages by other human beings all through your life that you will never see again. And then there are those people that you come to an intersection with, and you intersect your lives with these people for whatever the circumstances are, whatever the reasons are. You intersect with those people and you will engage. You may have long history with them. You may have a shorter season. You may have a longer season. But there are others that you may have a good season, a bad season, whatever that case may be. Right? So I appreciate at this stage of my life every intersection, and I try to see from that intersection what is the lesson, what's the experience that I can gain, or what can I contribute to that intersection. So that's one of the reflections that I had during this season of celebration. With that, today, last night, Jimmy Carter, who was the 39th president of the United States of America, my favorite president, and I had the opportunity to meet Jimmy Carter back in July 15th of 2015. Thanks to Susan Peters, the late, great Susan Peters, who was the director of health there at the University of Chicago. I found out that Jimmy Carter was coming to town, was in town, and was doing a book signing at the University of Chicago. I found out about it late, and Susan Peters made it possible for me to go there, get in line, and I got a chance to meet one of the greatest presidents in the United States history. And he certainly was a impactful president in the one term that he did serve. Now, there were some things that happened in his presidency that people like to point to say that he was a bad president because of the oil crisis, which he had nothing to do with, because of inflation, which he had absolutely nothing to do with. However, we're going to go through some of the history because I don't want for you to be ignorant. Nobody who pays attention to this program, I don't want you to be ignorant. One of the things that I also have learned in 2024 and in my tenure of doing radio and in my tenure of doing these podcasts, that I have a responsibility and I certainly have a commitment for making sure that my listening audience, my circle of people, and those of you who engage with me, I am going to make sure that you are not ignorant of the facts. There is so much misinformation that goes on. There is so much talk that people repeat that they call their feelings or their thoughts. Well, feelings are not facts, and a person's thoughts are not truths. The facts are the facts. And there are people who will not read, they're not going to research, but they do rely on people that they trust to provide them with information. And for anybody who trusts me to provide you with information, I am going to provide you with the facts. So this ideology that is being put out or has been put out by many of people, Jimmy Carter's presidency after 40 some odd years, we have seen and we are experiencing some of his work today. And we're going to talk about those. And I want you to know what those facts are, not the farter that you hear from people who are just political. They have to toe a political line because they're on one side, because they are Republicans. I'm a Democrat. I'm going to stay a Democrat. Now, there was a time that I was frustrated, but I'm going to stay a Democrat. And there are times that I will be frustrated. But I'm a Democrat, and for good reasons, because there is no other political affiliation that has delivered the kinds of public policy, the kinds of laws that you and I today enjoy and experience than the Democratic Party and Democratic presidency. Republicans have no track record for delivering as for the community that I come from, the average ordinary working person, the average Black person, period. So for many reasons, I am a Democrat. Now, is the Democratic Party perfect? Of course not. Are they anywhere close to being perfect? Of course not. So that means that there is room for them to get better. But in order for the party to get better, the people must get better. So we must do better. We must be better informed. We must be better educated. We must be better engaged. We have to organize. We have to do all of those things as citizens in order to make the party work better. Let me give you an example. You own a car. You've had that car, let's say, for 3 or 4 years, or however long you've had a car. Maybe you don't have one now, maybe you've had a car. You've had to make some repairs to the car. Well, you could have just went and bought a whole nother car the first time that a repair was needed. Just go buy another car. Don't make the repairs. Buy another car. Why make the repairs when you can just go and you can purchase another car? Now, I know that some of you are saying, that sounds crazy. If I can just go to the car or go to the repair shop, and if the air condition is not working, they might need to change the compressor for the air condition, and the compressor gets changed, or I might need to change a valve or something, or an O2 sensor on my car, and the car is running better, or I may need a new water pump. But rather than doing that, just go spend thousands upon thousands of dollars buying a whole nother car when you could have repaired that one. Why waste, $500 repairing the car that's already worth $1,000? It sounds crazy, doesn't it? I know it sounds crazy because it is crazy. And that is the same thing what I'm saying to you about the Democratic Party. Stop with this puritan attitude that many of you have taken based on some misinformation that you have gotten from other people. That's largely what that is. A bunch of misinformation that you have gotten from other people. So let's stop with that. So what do? Just like you do your car. You take your car to the repair and you get your car repaired, and then the whole car runs better. You have to take the car and get the oil change every 3,000 miles. You have to get put antifreeze in the car. You got to change the tires. You got to get new tires ever so often. So you have to do some upkeep on the vehicle so that you get the best use out of the vehicle. That is the exact same thing that we have to do with the Democratic Party. With those parts of the Democratic Party that we see has some failures and some shortcomings, and they're not getting better, guess who has to fix them? You and I fix them. And how do we fix them? Either one, we have to organize. We have to organize ourselves together so that we can have the strength in numbers in a unified way in order for us to have the strength to make sure that we have the tools to fix the parts of the Democratic Party that we want to have fixed, so the whole party runs better and that the whole party works better for us. You don't throw out the baby with the bathwater. That's not how you make progress. And I want to break this down into the most common denominators so that you and I can see that this purist attitude that some have developed out of, the political campaigns and those people who have the funds to misrepresent the truth and to continue to plant that stuff into people's minds. Well, I don't want any of you to be ignorant. I don't want any of you who are watching me and who pays attention to this program to be ignorant of facts. And those people who are out there spewing misinformation and what they might call alternative facts, there's no such thing as an alternative facts. There are only the facts. There are only the truths. So that's where I want for us to get to. And I want for you to be there to making sure so that when people bring you information or when people bring you misinformation, whatever it is, take the time to go research so that you can dig and read and get the truth. Maybe what they said is true. But when you take the time to go do the research yourself, you'll go to the library, You'll go to reliable sources, because everything that you see on the internet is not a reliable source. Reliable sources means that you can go to more than one source to corroborate the same information. So that is the important thing about doing research and making sure that you are corroborating what the truth actually is or what somebody says. So I don't want for any of us, any of you, to be misled. I want you to operate on the facts. This is why I'm going to go through several of them tonight. Several of them tonight. We probably won't get through all of them, but I'll go through several of them, and I will be more than happy to take your calls or questions that you may have. But let me just start here with the 39th president of the United States of America, Jimmy Carter. I'm not even talking about his philanthropic work, his volunteer work that he did for all of those years for Habitat, Humanity, and going around the country building and participating and volunteering and building thousands of homes for people who enjoy those homes today because of President Jimmy Carter's involvement. He volunteered. That was not his organization. He volunteered at the organization of Habitat for Humanity. And those who started Habitat for Humanity said that Habitat for Humanity would not have been able to do as much as they have been able to do without the involvement of Jimmy Carter. His presence and participation and volunteering with that organization gave that organization the platform and the opportunity to do the great work that they're doing this very date, that many and thousands upon thousands of people are benefiting from as a result of Jimmy Carter's work over these past 40 some odd years post his presidency. But I want to tell you a few facts about his presidency. And I read several of the writings about his presidency. And one of the articles that I saw I believe it was in the Washington Post, where it talked about how he didn't always handle some of the challenges as best. His presidency is remembered almost exclusively for a series of events that were largely beyond his control: the seizure of 52 American hostages in Iran and the failed rescue mission to free them, the state of the United States economy, which resulted largely from the disruptions in the Middle East, the oil supply, and the presumption of the Cold War with the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan. The Soviets' documents show had nothing to do with Carter's perceived weakness. The former president has done great things. The communications that you and I enjoy this day with the internet, all of these different forms of communication, they are here in the form that they're in largely because during Jimmy Carter's presidency, he deregulated to allow for the expansion of competition and communications. But now we see all of these different areas of technology and communications that we deal with. The fact that of civil rights at the time, here's a man who was born 1924 down in the deep South, But Jimmy Carter always lived with, and when his parents went out of town, he lived with black families. So he's been around black people all of his life. It was not some new thing, wasn't not a political thing that he took on civil rights during his administration. He appointed more women to the federal bench, black women to the federal bench. This was during the 70s. Appointed black women to the bench, thousands of political prisoners. He participated and got rescued. All of the military systems that Ronald Reagan, when he came into office, all of the military systems that he enacted, and we give him credit for enacting those systems, they were all Jimmy Carter's administrations. So you ask the question, then how do these things happen? Because an administration proposes policies. Congress disposes of those policies. They either pass those policies or they don't pass those policies. But they pass those policies that are proposed by a president, and the president signs those policies into law. Those policies that are signed into law don't take effect tomorrow. Some of those policies won't take effect for 4 years, 5 years, 2 years. However, you won't see the impact of those policies for many years to come. Now, we can, and I'm going to talk about those policies that we have not enjoyed that were unleashed by Ronald Reagan's administration. And we're going to talk about that. So Jimmy Carter, even if, and the Republicans shut that down, they shut that down with respect to the environment. Solar panels and solar energy, this was proposed under the Carter administration, and the Republicans shut it down, would not support it. What do we see happening now? Can you imagine where we would be in terms of green energy today, 40 years later, 45 years later, if in fact we would have that the Republicans in Congress would have supported the clean energy bills and the clean energy regulations that the Carter administration was calling for back then? Look how far in advance we would be. We could probably have 25 to 30% of all of our energy being produced, clean energy being produced by solar, if in fact those policies had gone into effect and they would not have blocked them. Jimmy Carter ran, and Jimmy Carter served his term as a president who said to us, I'm not going to lie to you. I'm not going to play politics with you. May not be popular, but I'm not going to make decisions that are going to be politically expedient for me to be in a public place. I'm going to tell you the truth. That was what was consequential about his campaign, which launched him to becoming the president, the 39th president of the United States, because he was largely unknown. But he didn't lie to us. He told us the truth about conditions and circumstances. It wasn't politically expedient. Even during the time of inflation, the person that he hired for inflation was very straightforward with him and told him that he might want to think about appointed him for inflation or for, for the Treasury. And Jimmy Carter said, because he told Jimmy Carter that I am going to steamroll this inflation, but it is going to have some serious impact politically. And Jimmy Carter told him to do what you need to do so that the American public and the American people have a better economy. You don't do it because it's going to be politically expedient for me. You do what is right. And of course, the course of action that he took the next year, the very next year, he loses the election, but inflation starts to tumble. The economy starts to get better, not because of anything that Ronald Reagan did. Ronald Reagan was able to take credit for the work that Jimmy Carter did, the policies that Jimmy Carter put into place. That's how it happens. That's how things happen, because many of those things that took place, several of those things that took place, Jimmy Carter had no control of. He just happened to be the president at the time where they started to impact the American people. And because you're the president of the United States, you have to take the hits. Because the truth of the matter is, most people don't understand how policy works. They don't understand what the president has control of and what the president does not have control of. The president can impact certain things, but he doesn't have full control over these things. Like the oil crisis, he didn't have control over. So here's another article. I'm going to read some of this article that I thought, because there are several of them, several of the writings where they talked about a new appraisal of Jimmy Carter's administration. Here's one by Kevin Melnick of the Washington Post, who says the former President Jimmy Carter's death Sunday prompted condolences and praise from current and former leaders in the United States and across the world. Many of them complimented Carter's human rights activism, his conflict resolution work, and kindness from his presidency and the following decades. President Joe Biden said at a news conference from the U.S. Virgin Islands that everyone could learn lessons about selflessness from Carter's life and legacy. I see a man not only, quote, I see a man not only of our times, but for all times, he said. We could all do well to be a little more like Jimmy Carter. Earlier Sunday, Biden and the First Lady, Jill Biden, said in a statement that Carter was their dear friend for more than 6 decades. What's extraordinary about Jimmy Carter, though it is millions of people throughout America and the world who never met and thought of him as a dear friend as well. Unquote. President-elect Donald Trump also praised Carter, writing on Truth Social that Carter did everything in his power to improve the lives of all Americans. That's very true. Quote, for that, we all owe him a debt of gratitude. Carter's son, James E. Carter III, said in a statement that his father was a hero not only to him, but to everyone who believes in peace, human rights, and unselfish love. Quote, the world is our family because of the way he brought people together, said Carter III. Many world and U.S. leaders commended Carter for his work, including the historic agreement he brokered between Israel and Egypt in the late 1970s, giving control of the Panama Canal to Panama and building homes with Habitat for Humanity. Others praised Carter's Sunday school program at a Georgia church he offers to eradicate a tropical disease. his oversight of elections for fairness in troubled countries, and his work to prioritize energy conservation. Jimmy Carter served as commander-in-chief for 4 years, but he served as the beloved, unassuming Sunday school teacher at Maranatha Baptist Church in Plains, Georgia for 40 years. Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell, a Republican from Kentucky, said in a statement, and his humble devotion leaves us little doubt which of those important roles he prized the most. Former presidents shared praise for Carter, including Barack Obama, George W. Bush, and Bill Clinton. Carter was the only Democratic elected president between Lyndon B. Johnson's and the Clinton terms in the White House. Clinton awarded Carter and his late wife, Rosalind, the Presidential Medal of Freedom in 1999. He worked tirelessly for a better, fairer world, Clinton said in a statement, with Hillary Clinton, his wife, and former Secretary of State. More than a dozen world leaders shared condolences for Carter and his family, often referring to a Nobel Peace Prize he received in 2002. As president, Carter granted full diplomatic recognition to China, building on the opening made by President Richard M. Nixon to normalize relations. Chinese President Xi Jinping, in a statement, expressed condolences for Carter, was the promoter and decision maker in the establishment of China-U.S. diplomatic relations. The state-run Xinyu News Agency reported on Monday. In 1978, Carter returned to the crown of St. Stephen's, a legendary symbol of humanity that was whisked out of the country symbol of Hungary that was whisked out of the country in a closing months of World War II for safekeeping, and was eventually given the United States Hungarian Prize. Minister Viktor Orban said on X on Sunday that Carter's return of 1,000-year-old relic gave freedom-loving Hungarians hope in a hopeless time. Egyptian President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi said on X that Carter's role in creating a peace agreement between Egypt and Israel will remain etched in the annals of history. He will be remembered as one of the world's most prominent leaders in the service of humanity. But Georgia's politician, who also complimented Carter for never forgetting his roots, quote, as the only American president thus far to come from Georgia, Republican Georgia Governor Brian Kemp said in a statement, he showed the world the impact our state and its people have on the country. Now, those are some of the reports of people and what they thought of Jimmy Carter. And of course, we hear that from people, whether they be political, whether it was something that they just thought they had to do. But we're talking about a person who had significant policies that you and I are experiencing today. We have some of we're able to produce the kinds of energy and the kinds of oil production today because of Jimmy Carter's deregulations during that time. It was not because of Ronald Reagan. It was not because of George Bush. It was not because of George W. Bush. It was not even because of Bill Clinton. It was not because of Barack Obama. It was not because of Donald Trump. It was not because of our current president. This is all directly tied to and inextricably tied to the presidency of Jimmy Carter. That's why it's important that you read and you get the facts about their accomplishments and what they've done. That's why Jimmy Carter has always been one of my favorite. I'm a studier of history. I'm certainly a study of political history because I understand how our lives are impacted. And we have to understand how our lives are impacted by the people who served in these positions. And the idea that, you can look at a situations like, just take one situation that we have now, and there are some people who will take a situation and make that a reason why they will vote the wrong way. And we saw that there were millions of people who cast their vote based on a situation, not on a policy that had anything to do with the current administration, or that was going to significantly in any way impact their lives. But people voted based on how they feel. Your emotions have no capacity to rationalize. They have no capacity to think whatsoever. All your feelings have is a capacity to know that they want to be satisfied. Whatever that is, that's a feeling. It is not a thought. When somebody says, well, I feel that they did, well, that's what you felt. It's important that you think about what the actual truth is and what the information is of the facts, that how you should make a decision based on that information. Not how you feel, not on your personal thoughts, which is your opinion, which has no benefit of factual information. An opinion, just because it is given, has to be rooted into something. Even you go before a court and both sides provides an argument, they provide evidence. And of course, this is after all of these different rules have gone, but they provide the information and they provide arguments and they provide evidence and corroborating witnesses. And then the trial takes place. There's testimony, there's examination, cross-examination. And then there is a decision rendered by the judge. It is the court's opinion that they send, but that opinion is rooted in facts that are put before the court to come to their decision. So your feelings are not facts. And just because you feel some way doesn't make it factual. And just because you think a thought doesn't make it true. The facts are the facts, and you have to get the facts. So I don't want you to go into 2025 being politically ignorant. That when somebody says something to you in the lunchroom, or someone says something to you sitting around just talking and saying, well, this is what they did. This is, how they did it under. And you take that as being true just because that is the way that they want for you to respond. Don't operate that way. Don't take that just because somebody that you happen to enjoy their embrace or you enjoy their company, that they are telling you the truth. I'm not saying that they're not. I'm just saying don't just be a sponge and take what they say as being truth without making sure that you corroborate that. Because I'm sure that if you are my age, which is 64, so if you're 50, 55, 60, that you have heard all of this misinformation about what a bad president Jimmy Carter was. Well, when I hear people say that sort of thing, the question that I ask them is to demonstrate to me why he was a bad president for us. Please go and bring to me documented evidence why Jimmy Carter was a bad president, or anything else that somebody tries to make some sort of statement politically. You've got to provide some evidence of that, and not some opinion from some podcast, internet that you've seen and nobody has ever heard anything of, because somebody has stated an opinion, but they couldn't direct you to a place where you can go and corroborate it. And you can corroborate this stuff by going to the Department of Treasury. They have all of the information that you want to know about what a president has done, certainly economically, what their policies were, what their accomplishments were, and the groups that those policies impacted. You can get all that information. This is not hard. It's public information. It's going to take a little bit of reading. Well, I'm going to take that back. It's going to take a lot of reading. It's going to take a whole lot of reading for you to do. But at least you'll come out with a fullness of the information. And so that when it's time for you to make decisions, you'll be that much more informed. So you want to know about Jimmy Carter's accomplishments? That's how you can go and you can get them. But I'm going to share with you tonight. On some of those accomplishments. Listen, if you want to call in, you're welcome to call in. I'm opening up the phone lines that you will be able to call in to the number at 951-221-8221. I know that there were some people who called in last week when we did the program on health. We're going to continue to do programs like that. So you'll hear this connection. And so you can call in at 951-221-8221. I want to thank all of those of you who have joined me from other places around the country. And we certainly appreciate your participation and your getting in touch, or certainly participating in the program. Now, so let's talk about some of those presidential accomplishments that you may have not seen, or you certainly may not have heard about. All right. Now, this comes from the Department of Treasury that talks about they talk about all these things. And again, there's a lot of people who talk about his domestic and his charitable achievements as the 39th president, and certainly extend well beyond his time in office. He was a person who really wanted for there to be, a much more competent and compassionate government, not a government that just, slammed people over the head and ruled with an iron fist. That was just not what his saying. We talked about 1978, how the Camp David Peace Accords in 1978. Jimmy Carter played a significant role in the Camp David Accords, with a pair of agreements that helped stabilize the otherwise tumultuous relationships between Egypt and Israel. From the outside of his presidency, Carter hoped to reconvene the Geneva Conference to end the Arab-Israeli tensions. Ultimately, 2 weeks of secret negotiations at the United States presidential retreat at Camp David yielded great results. The Egyptian President Anwar Sadat and Israeli Prime Minister Menachem Begin began and signed a series of agreements in September of 1978. The Camp David Peace Accords are thought to be a framework for the peace treaty between Israel and Egypt the following year. The Carter Center is responsible for observing 114 elections in 39 countries to establish and strengthen democratic democracies, and was a leader in the new public health approaches to prevent and control diseases in Africa and Latin America. By the creation of the Department of Education, this was a Jimmy Carter. President Andrew Johnson first attempted to create the United States Department of Education in 1867, but it was downgraded to the Office of Education out of the fear it would have too much power over local schools. Under Carter, the Department of Education was officially created in 1980 with a different vision. While Johnson's department would have existed primarily to collect data about the nation's school, Carter's was born out of growing efforts to help foster equal access to education, according to the department's website. He established the National Energy Policy. Carter created the United States Department of Energy and is behind policy establishing national energy goals. The National Energy Act focused on reducing annual growth in energy demand and oil imports and gasoline consumption, as well as improving the efficacy of heating and cooling systems, increasing coal production, and introducing solar energy in American homes. All of this was done under President Jimmy Carter. He's also been lauded for decontrolling domestic petroleum prices to stimulate production. The Carter Work Project. Carter was in New York to speak to the church in 1984 when he stopped by a Habitat for Humanity construction site, according to the organization's website. Wanting to secure more volunteers for the project, Carter and his wife returned to the site with dozens of people and helped renovate an apartment building. So began the first Carter Work Project, which is now a week-long annual tradition. To date, the Carters have joined more than 103,000 volunteers across 14 different countries to repair and build thousands of homes, according to the Habitat for Humanity. These are just some of the accomplishments of Jimmy Carter. Many of you probably didn't know that Jimmy Carter started something happened here. Let me find out what's going on here so that you all can get back into the program. I certainly want to get your input, and oh, there we go. All right, so 951-221-8221 is the number. So these are just some of the accomplishments of the presidency of Jimmy Carter. All of what you've been hearing about Jimmy Carter and, inflation and all of that. How did he handle it? Well, unfortunately, there were some things that happened, which we'll get to in terms of Republicans. You hear me say, and have heard me say that there hasn't been a legitimately elected Republican since Dwight Eisenhower. And the reason why that is the case is because Dwight Eisenhower was the only person who didn't interfere with the other side's campaign whatsoever. Certainly, he did not interfere with the incumbent presidency to try to create a conflict in order for him to win. Every Republican president who won, there was some involvement, starting with Richard Nixon. Richard Nixon ended up becoming the president of the United States because Richard Nixon's campaign, after Lyndon Baines Johnson had negotiated ending the war in Vietnam, Richard Nixon's campaign reached out to Vietnam and asked them not to end the war until after the election. Lyndon Baines Johnson, there's a recording of Lyndon Baines Johnson knowing that this took place and that he would not go public with it in order for the country, because he wanted to put the country before himself. He didn't want to bring this kind of stain amongst the country and amongst the people. There's a recording in the archives. You can go and you can get that recording of Lyndon Baines Johnson and his communications with his campaign manager. It's all in the archives. That you could hear his comments, understanding what was going on and the interference in the election. Ronald Reagan, when Jimmy Carter and Ronald Reagan were running, Jimmy Carter was actually leading in the polls. It was until Jimmy Carter had negotiated to get those who had been kidnapped by the Iranians, to get them out. The 52 people that the Americans that they had kidnapped, Jimmy Carter, his administration had struck a deal to get the people out. It was the Ronald Reagan campaign that reached out and contacted, asking them not to release the hostages until after the election, and then they will provide to them, in exchange for that, whatever it is that they wanted. Now you can fast forward to what happened in the election with Vice President Al Gore and George W. Bush, where the state of Florida essentially gave the election to George Bush because they would not allow for the recount, which we now know that would have given Florida to Al Gore at the time. So we have not had a legitimately elected Republican, including Trump, since Dwight Eisenhower, who was the last legitimately elected Republican presidency. You will find nothing of interference between his campaign and the fact that he was successfully became the president of the United States. So January 20th, 1977, Jimmy Carter was inaugurated. Carter's inaugurated the 39th president of the United States on January 21st, 1977. He drafted the invaders pardon. Carter pardoned Vietnam War draft invaders. The Emergency Natural Gas Act, Congress passes Emergency Natural Gas Act, authorizing the president to deregulate natural gas prices due to a shortage in supply. Carter signed the bill and announced plans to present an energy program to Congress. He later proposes the establishment of a cabinet-level Department of Energy. In February 15th, 1977, Secretary of State travels to the Middle East. Secretary of State Cyrus Vance travels to the Middle East in an attempt to reconvene the 1973 Geneva Conference. February 17, 1977, Soviet dissident receives Carter's support. Soviet dissident Andrei Sakharov receives a written letter of support from President Carter. April 18, 1977, Carter addresses the nation on energy. In an address to the nation, Carter calls his program of energy conservation the moral equivalent of war. March 22nd, 1977, Carter speaks to Notre Dame. Carter speaks at Notre Dame University, presenting a new direction in foreign policy, which takes the focus of anti-communism and emphasizes support for fundamental human rights. June 20th, 1977, Carter opposes the B-1 bomber. Carter announces opposition to production of the B-1 strategic bomber. In July 1919, 1977, Carter meets Israeli Prime Minister. Newly elected Israeli Prime Minister Menachem Begin meets with Carter in Washington. December 29th, 1977, Carter meets with Jurik in Warsaw. Carter meets with the Polish First Secretary Jurik in Warsaw. December 31st, 1977, Carter visits the Shah of Iran. Carter visits the Shah Mohammed Reza Pahlavi in Tehran, calling Iran an island of stability in the Middle East. Carter takes the tour. Carter travels into India, Saudi Arabia, Egypt, France, and Belgium. March 9th, 1978. There was a coal strike that was busted. Carter invokes the Taft-Hartley Act to end a strike. The strike by coal miners, March 17th, 1978, the potential Soviet threat. Carter warns of the Soviet threat in a foreign policy address at Wake Forest University. June 7th, 1978, Carter delivers a graduation speech. Carter graduation speech at Annapolis emphasizes the importance of human rights in foreign policy. And September 5th, 1978, mediation at Camp David. Jimmy Carter mediates talks between Prime Minister Menachem Begin and Israeli and President Anwar Sadat of Egypt and at Camp David, resulting in a peace treaty between the two nations. Camp David Accords signed on September 17, 1978. Jimmy Carter oversaw an agreement between Israeli Prime Minister Menachem Begin and Egyptian President Anwar Sadat that called for the Israeli guardrails withdraw from the Sinai Peninsula and the establishment of diplomatic relations between the two countries. The Camp David Accord are often considered the most significant foreign policy achievement of Carter's administration. Tension in the Middle East had continued unabated since the 1967 war between the Israeli and Egypt. In November of 1967, the United Nations Security Council passed Resolution 242. The resolution called for the withdrawal of Israeli armed forces from territories acquiring during the war and for termination of all claims or state of belligerency between all nations or states in the area. Recognition by Egypt of the right of Israel to peacefully exist, and the return of lands acquired by 6 days. I'm sorry, acquired by the 6 days war remained preconditions for peace in the region. Following the Yom Kippur War of October 1973, the Security Council issued a Resolution 338 calling on the parties to begin negotiating towards establishing a just and durable peace. President Carter decided to act after Egypt and Anwar Sadat of Egypt had traveled to Jerusalem, and Israeli Prime Minister Menachem Begin had returned from a reciprocal visit to Cairo. Carter invited the leaders to the United States to hammer out a peace treaty between the countries. October 15th, 1978, Congress passes the Energy Employment Bill. Congress passes a revised energy bill 18 months after Jimmy Carter proposed it. Congress also passes the Humphrey-Hawkins Full Employment Bill. December 15th, 1978, China granted diplomatic status. April 5th, 1979, Phase 2 of the Energy Plan. Carter announces his Phase 2 Energy Plan calling for conservation and phasing out price controls on oil. April 20th, 1979, President attacked by rabbit. President Carter claims a rabbit tried to attack him during a fishing trip in Georgia. And the Washington Post runs a front page story with the headline, President Attacked by Rabbit. I thought you would appreciate a little bit of humor. On June 7, 1979, the MX missile approved. Carter approves the development of the MX missile. And June 18, 1979, Strategic Arms Limitation Treaty. June 15, 1979, a crisis of confidence. Carter delivers what becomes known as his Malaise speech, blaming the problems of the nation on a crisis of confidence. On July 15, 1979, President Jimmy Carter delivered what became as his crisis of confidence or Malaise speech to the American public on the national television. In the late 1970s, the United States faced a variety of challenges, including high inflation, rising interest and unemployment rates, and an energy crisis created by dependence on foreign oil and overconsumption. In response, President Carter called together a gathering of the American citizens at Camp David and spoke with them, as well as with others across the nation, to gain a sense of what ordinary citizens regarded as the main problems facing the country. This is where I told you that people don't do a whole lot of research and reading. They look to the sources that they trust to provide them with information. But you have to make sure that the source that you trust is a source that is doing the work to make sure that they are disseminating the information accurately, truthfully, so that you're not being misled. But there's always the way to make sure that you're not being lied to or you're not being misled is to make sure that you go and research this information. You'll be able to research all the information that I'm reading off to you tonight. Let's go back to July 15th, 1979. Jimmy Carter delivered what became his crisis of confidence Millet speech, the speech to the American public on national television. In the 1970s, the United States faced a variety of challenges, including high inflation, rising interest rates and unemployment rates, and an energy crisis created by dependence on foreign oil and overconsumption. In response, President Carter called together a gathering of the citizens at Camp David and spoke with them as well as with others across the nation to gain a sense of what ordinary citizens regarded as the main problem facing the country. When Americans turned in to watch the president on July 15, most expected a talk on the energy crisis, the administration plans to address it. Carter, however, targeted border issues. He began by acknowledging that the country faced a fundamental threat to American democracy. The president identified the threat as a crisis of confidence that struck at the heart and soul of the nation's will. For Carter, the problem lie in the lack of respect Americans held for the public institutions and leaders. Restoring the faith and confidence, said Carter, was the most important task facing the nation. Although the speech also contains substantially energy proposals, increased domestic production, the restriction of foreign oil imports, and an excess profits tax on energy income to pay for new alternative energy pavement. Much of this was lost in the rhetoric of melees that colored the address. So these are just some of it. I'm going to go through some of the others. July 18th, 1979, 5 cabinet members resigned. Carter accepts the resignations of 5 cabinet members and names Hamilton Jordan, chief of staff. On September 14, 1979, approval ratings were low. A Washington Post poll gives Carter the lowest approval rating of his presidency. September 15, 1979, Carter collapses in $10,000. Carter collapses on a 10K. Carter collapses in a 10K race, leading the press to depict the event as representative of strength and his presidency. Department of Education, Carter signs a bill establishing the Department of Education and appoints Shirley Hufstedler as its secretary. November 4th, 1979, America taken hostage in Tehran. In December 4th, 1979, Carter announces candidacy. Carter officially announces his candidacy for re-election. In January 3rd, 1980, table SALT. Due to the invasion of Afghanistan, Carter asked the Senate to table its consideration of SALT II. He also placed an embargo on grain salts to the Soviet Union and suggests that the policy of boycotting the Summer Olympics in Moscow. Now, and then there are other things, that I can go into, and I can read you off his accomplishments and those things that he was able to get done. And some of them you will say, well, how does that impact me? Well, these policies impact us because we're enjoying things that we're enjoying today, as because of the Democratic leadership and when Democratic presidencies existed. Now, look, you and I enjoy where we live today. You can choose where you live today because of the Fair Housing Act. You remember the Fair Housing Act? Well, that means that you get to live where you want to live because of the Fair Housing Act. When was it created. So now the Fair Housing Act. The Fair Housing Act was created in response to years of grassroots organizations and protests against housing discrimination, and was signed into law by President Lyndon Baines Johnson April 11th, 1968. The reason why you can go to buy a home wherever it is that you can afford to purchase a home, or wherever you desire to go purchase a home, you can go and live there wherever you want to live without there being the consequences of redlining or discrimination, because the Democrats and Republicans voted against it, passed the Fair Housing Act. If you want to talk about the Civil Rights Act, when it was created, let's look at the Civil Rights Act when it was created. The Civil Rights Act. This act, signed into law by President Lyndon Baines Johnson on July 2nd, 1964, prohibited discrimination in public places, provided for the integration of schools and other public facilities, and made employment discrimination illegal. A Democrat signed this into law. You get to enjoy these freedoms because of the Democratic Party and a Democratic president. The Voting Rights Act. When was the Voting Rights Act created? The Voting Rights Act was created 1965. The Voting Rights Act was created in 1965, signed into law by Lyndon Baines Johnson and the Democrats. All of these policies that you enjoy, the Department of Housing, in the Department of Housing, where you have HUD, where you now can purchase a home, and it doesn't require you to have 20%. But because before we had the Fair Housing Act, and because of the Franklin Delano Roosevelt creating housing and urban development, that allowed for people to purchase homes, and these were Democrats, allowed for people to purchase homes, even though they didn't have 20%, because the only way that you can purchase a home back then is you had to have 20%, and you also had to have the blessing of the financial institution who would finance you. But because of Democratic leadership, you now can purchase a home and you don't have to have 20% down. This created all kinds of opportunity for people who were not wealthy people, who didn't come from the so-called right zip codes. Let's talk about we talked about redlining. Let's talk about redlining. Redlining is illegal because Democrats. Social Security. You now, those of you who receive Social Security benefits, you receive those benefits because Democrats passed the bill and a Democratic president signed it into law. Medicare and Medicaid were all produced and passed by Democrats. Republicans voted against these measures. You will hear people give you this tag about, well, we once voted Republicans. Today's Republicans were the old yellow dog Dixiecrats who supported slavery, and because um, because there were people who were the yellow dog Dixiecrats, who supported slavery in the South. That is the Republican Party of the day. And there were Republicans who supported that, and the people got tired of the Dixiecrats. And so those Dixiecrats joined what is known as the Republican Party of today. And thusly is why you have the current Democratic Party of today, all the way up until the 1950s. So if we were voting today, back then, today's Democratic Party is more in line with what the Republicans were back then, which is why we voted then. And of course, when they turned and they could no longer win the Civil War based on slavery and wanting to maintain slavery, although slavery is written into the Constitution, if you are convicted of a crime, you become the property of the state, under the control of the state. So slavery is otherwise illegal except you be convicted of a crime and in prison. Now, I fundamentally believe that there is no place for slavery in the Constitution, period. And you should not be subjected to slavery by law because you may have been convicted of a crime. I don't know whether you're guilty or not of that crime, but because you were convicted of a crime does not mean that you should lose your rights of citizenship. But more importantly, you should not lose your rights of human rights. So that's what this is all about. This is why I am a Democrat, because what you enjoy today from an imperfect party are all of these measures that I have gone through. You enjoy them today because of Democrats, not because of Republicans. Republicans opposed these ideas. They opposed the New Deal when Franklin Delano Roosevelt was the president, and they oppose anything that is progressive, that is going to help the average American citizen, black or white. If you move more recently to this date and you want to know about more of what Democrats have established and accomplished in this country, we can have that conversation. We can have that conversation, but you certainly want to talk about what the facts are. I want to talk about what the facts are, all right? Let's go through um, some of the well-noted Democrats who actually made history. 1925. Oh, by the way, um, Jimmy Carter. And let me just pull that up for you because I forgot to cover this, and I want you to I want you to know about some of these facts that I want to share with you about Jimmy Carter. We talked about um, ooh, pardon me. We talked about Jimmy Carter. By the way, it's the number is 951-221-8221 if you want to call. Um, but there is a story that you may not know about Jimmy Carter. I want to find out how many of you knew about this story about Jimmy Carter. Let me go back to my notes here. Let's see. I'll find that story. I thought that you certainly may. Okay, now why can I? And I flag this. Okay, let me try to see if I can find it this way. And I don't want to. The reason why I'm looking for it is I had it in my notes. Okay, let me see if I can search for it this way. Oh, what did I do with that one? Okay, let me look for it a different way. This one I want you to know. Now, this was not about his presidency. This is about Jimmy Carter. Let's see. Here. Okay. A woman convicted of murder became the Carters' beloved White House nanny. You probably didn't hear this story. After, oh, come on. Here it is. Okay. Keeps knocking me off my story here. When and this was, part of his history that I had not, um, learned. And I learned this, oh, I don't know, maybe 5, 10 years ago. come on. Give me a hard time here. Don't give me a hard time. All right, here we go. Okay. After President Jimmy Carter moved into the White House, it took time for his 9-year-old daughter, Amy, to adjust to life in Washington. Time and her beloved nanny from Georgia. Amy's been much happier, Carter wrote in his diary in late February 1977, since Mary Fitzpatrick got out of prison and came up to the White House to be with us. When she first met the Carters, Fitzpatrick was a young black woman wrongfully serving a life sentence for killing a man and had been assigned to work at the Georgia governor's mansion. By day, she served as Amy's nanny. At night, she returned to her cot at a nearby prison. After Carter won the 1976 presidential election, he and his wife, Rosalind, asked Fitzpatrick, who later changed their last name to Prince, whether she'd like to join them in D.C. Not only did they request a reprieve from Georgia's parole board so that she could move to the White House, but Carter had himself designated as her parole officer. Prince worked at the nation's most famous home for all 4 years of Carter's presidency, accompanying Amy everywhere from state dinners to rodeos. She attended school functions, oversaw her swimming lessons, and once even spent the night with Amy and a playmate in a treehouse outside the Oval Office. Prince moved to Plains, Georgia, with the family following Carter's defeat in the 1980 presidential election. She remained in their lives thereafter, working as a housekeeper, a babysitter, and a seamstress, and a confidant to Rosalind Carter. She eventually received a full pardon from the state of Georgia, Carter wrote in Keeping Faith Memoirs of Presidents. He changed my life, Prince, now in her late 70s, told the Atlanta Constitution in 2002. He's a godsend person. Prince's remarkable story is one that is difficult to imagine in any modern presidency, but Carter's. It tells us something essential about the character and religious values of our strangely perplexing 39th president. Biographer Kai Bird wrote in his book, The Outlier, The Unfinished Presidency of Jimmy Carter. Carter's press team didn't try to talk him or Rosalind out of the decision to bring the nanny into the White House, and they ignored reporters' questions about her recalled Gerald Rothschild, who served as White House communications director for part of the Carter's presidency. The couple had made up their minds. Prince came with them. It's your friend. If he's your friend, Rothschild said of Carter before he died, you've got a friend for life. Prince, who did not respond to an interview request, was not just was not just a bit player in her own role. Through her intense bond with Amy and her sheer force of personality, Prince cultivated the Carters' loyalty and devotion, said Kate Anderson Brower, author of The Residence, Inside the Private World of the White House. She added, it's like she's part of the family. Prince grew up poor in Southwest Georgia and was a divorced mother of two when she was convicted of shooting and killing a man during an argument outside a bar in Lumpkin, Georgia in 1970. Prince later said her cousin's gun went off accidentally, while a witness said Prince pulled the trigger. In her cousin's defense, I was in the wrong place at the wrong time. Prince told Brower for the residents. Prince met court-appointed lawyer. Prince met her court-appointed lawyer only once before she entered the courtroom, where he persuaded her to plead guilty in exchange for a reduced sentence. Instead, Prince was sentenced to life in prison. She was young, black, and penniless, so she did as he told her. Rosalind Carter wrote in her memoir, First Lady from Plains. Less than a year after the conviction, Prince was working in the governor's mansion as a trustee. Georgia and some of southern states have a long running practice of using inmate labor in their capitals and governor's mansions. In her memoir, Rosalind Carter wrote that she learned firsthand about the inadequacies and inequality in our judicial system from the female prisoners who worked for her family in the mansion. Currently, 17 state prisoners are assigned to the Georgia governor's mansion, according to a spokeswoman for the Georgia Department of Correction. Prince told the magazine that Rosalind Carter asked her whether she'd like to take care of Amy, who was 3 at the time. She took me right away. Prince told the magazine she liked me to sing Swing Low, Sweet Chariot to her every night, and I would rub her back and lie down with her. When Prince joined the Carters in Washington, she became the country's most famous nanny. The Miami Herald ran a story about the criminal case with the headline, "The Night Amy Carter's Nanny Became a Murderess." Saturday Night Live featured her in a skit with Sissy Spacek playing Amy and comedian Garrett Morris playing Prince. Quote, "I was worldwide news," unquote, Prince told Brower, quote, "going from prison to the White House." Prince's daily life was entwined with that of her charge. When Amy was baptized at the First Baptist Church in Washington in 1977, Prince sat in the pew with the Carter family. A month later, reporters and the Carters were on hand when Prince joined the same church. Prince was unopposed by the predominantly white congregation that voted on admission, United Press International reported. Now, look, Prince lived in a third-floor apartment in the White House and received a salary of $6,004 a year, around $30,000 today. She later had her 2 sons relocated from Atlanta to Suitland, Maryland, where they were under her sister's care. When Prince finished taking care of Amy at night, she took a taxi to her sister to see her boys. According to the report, the residents, Prince helped them with their homework and laid out their clothes for school before taking a taxi back to the White House so she could be up early with Amy. She never asked the Carters whether her sons could move into the White House. "I never thought it was appropriate for me to have my family living in the White House under their roof," Prince told Brower. "That was my job. I was able to pay for them to be close to me and to have their own place." Prince found it difficult to make friends with other White House staff who viewed her as an outsider with special privileges. And Prince decided she wanted to cook a Southern style dinner for the first family. She could send all the cooks home at a moment's notice. Pryor wrote, she didn't have to play by anyone's rules as long as she kept the Carters happy. Prince's fondest White House memory came one evening while she was walking by the White House pool as Rosalind was swimming laps. She told Brower Prince was still wearing starch white uniform. Come on in, Rosalind called out. Just dive in your uniform. Prince had been taking swimming lessons so she could keep up with Amy. She jumped in, just me and the first lady, she said, together out swimming. That is the story of who the Carters really were, and Jimmy Carter. This is one of many reasons why Jimmy Carter will always be my favorite president, above any other president, above Barack Obama, above Bill Clinton, above Joe Biden. And all three of those Democratic presidents have great accomplishments and have contributed to the advancement of the average American person. That is why I am a Democrat. I am not going to throw the baby out with the bathwater. And so for those of you who may have joined a little bit later, I started the program off earlier saying that if you have a car and that car experiencing some mechanical issues, my question to you is, rather than having the mechanical issue repaired, just go buy a brand new car. Go buy another 20, 30, 40, 50, $60,000 car. Don't get the $800 mechanical issue fixed on the other car so that the car can, drive. Just go buy another car. Go buy the 30, 40, 50, $60,000 car, whatever it is that you could afford. Don't repair whatever the mechanical issue is on your existing car. Just go get another car. Now, that sounds crazy. And the reason why it sounds crazy, and I'm sure that some of you even thought that it sounds crazy. And you're absolutely right. It does sound crazy. It's just as crazy to abandon your family because some family member that you don't agree with has some issues. So you're going to abandon your entire family because a family member that you have a issue with. But you will not abandon your car that you have a mechanical issue with, rather than just go get a whole nother car. The reason why that is because it's crazy. It's as crazy as it sounds. And that is precisely what I think is crazy about people who are jumping ship on an emotional ride to go where? To go to another ship that is going to take you nowhere. I saw a meme, not a meme, but a little short food for thought where a woman was on, I don't know, TikTok, one of those things. And she said that a ship is designed to take you someplace. And if your relationship, your courtship, your fellowship, your business ship, if your any of those ships are not taking you someplace, then you need to abandon that ship. You can't say that about the Democratic Party because of all of the enjoyment that we have today. Where you live, nobody can discriminate against you, and if they do, there's a remedy for that. Redlining, Fair Housing Act, Voting Rights Act, Civil Rights Act, the Affordable Care Act, the Inflation Reduction Act, the Chips and Science Act, the American Rescue Act, the $16 billion that have been invested in HBCUs by this president, who will be another one-term most impactful president in our history, that the incoming administration is going to take credit for the work that was done by this president and a Democratic Congress that are going to be rolling out in 2025, 2026, 2027 to build infrastructures, to add industries, all because of a Democratic president and a Democratic Congress. That you're going to have the new administration taking credit for a great economy for which he had nothing to do with, the same way he inherited a great economy from Barack Obama, the 44th president, who inherited a mess of an economy that was losing 700,000 jobs a month in this country. 700,000 jobs a month. Let me make sure that I have my facts together, because again, I'm not going to have you going out with misinformation. How many jobs were we losing when Barack Obama took office? Now, of course, the economy gained 11.6 million jobs. But when Barack Obama took office, we were losing, let's see, yes, we were losing more than 700,000 jobs a month when Barack Obama took office. By the time Barack Obama left office, he had 74 months of straight job growth, putting more than 11.6 million jobs into his economy. So let me help you, for those of you who was not aware of the record of Jimmy Carter. I want you to do a little history study so that you can be led by facts, not by feelings. Feelings are not facts. They just need to be satisfied. but they're not facts. And your thoughts, just because you think them, are not the truth. The truth is the truth. And we have to go and get the truth. Not hard. Just have to go get them. So I see my nephew. Yeah, my nephew says that Carter tapped Chicago natives for HUD to pioneer the HUD Community Planning and Development Office. The history of Chicago and Shore Bank followed. Shore Bank, who played a significant role. As a matter of fact, I was a beneficiary of Shore Bank. Shore Bank helped a number of Black people. I got my first $750,000 line of credit through Shore Bank to start my business back, or my development business back in 2003, by way of a great relationship that I had with Andy Skolnick, who was my partner for about 10 years. And as a result of that, my business grew. But again, I just want for us to understand why the Democratic Party is the only vehicle for us. If you're not going to throw out and go get a whole brand new car because you have a mechanical issue, then why would you throw out the only vehicle that we have enjoyed progress for since 1930s, in the 1930s? There is no perfect party, just like there's no perfect family, but it's our families. And guess what? Some of us have some really challenging personalities in our family, but we're not going to throw away our family. We're going to try to make the personalities better. We're going to try to help them. And that is the same thing that I am saying to us, is to move on truthful information, to be informed. Don't be ignorant. Make that a part of going into 2025. I don't make resolutions, but certainly make a commitment going into 2025 that you're not going to go into 2025 being ignorant of the facts. 2025 and 2026, you are going to see some enormous economic strength and some great rollouts of projects and plans and programs that had nothing to do with the Trump administration. All was proposed and dealt with by the Democratic Party and the 46th President of the United States, Joseph Biden. Now, in these last few minutes, I'm going to talk about a few things. Again, if you want to call me, you can call me at 951-221-8221. I'd love to get your comments and hear from you. And believe me, I listen to some other programs that are just talking about things that, I don't know, I guess they matter to them, but I don't see how delving into somebody's personal life has any real benefit. So at any rate, but I certainly want to talk about, in these last few minutes, some decisions that have been made here in Chicago by the current mayor. Now, I am not in many ways, happy with Brandon Johnson. Let me just say that right off. I know Brandon, and I don't know if I would say we're friends, but I know him. And I sat down with him before he decided to run. I sat down with him right in the conference room at the Chicago Teachers Union and talked to him about several issues. Talked to him about expanding and creating a great economic team to expand the tax base by creating thousands of jobs by bringing in industries. And it fell on deaf ears when he became mayor, talking about reforming these policing for profit scams that are nothing but tax programs on the most vulnerable people of our communities. And of course, he made commitments that he was, and he has completely fallen in line like the past. Now, there are people who are saying that he's going to be a one-term mayor. That may very well be, but let me say this. I cannot tell you that he's going to be a one-term man because I don't know who the challenger is going to be. And if the challenger is going to be somebody like Paul Vallas again, Brandon Johnson is going to get my vote. It does not mean that I am, someone who is all excited about Brandon Johnson, but I do have to make an informed decision about what is the best route, or certainly the best person to deal with, or certainly to try and deal with as mayor of the city of Chicago. Now, if Paul Vallas props his head up again, Paul Vallas is a Republican. He is not a Democrat. He does not progressive philosophies. He doesn't in any way, shape, or form have the progressive values. His campaign was propped up by very wealthy Republicans. Jennifer Pritzker, I'm sorry, was it? Yeah. Jennifer Pritzker, Sam Zell, Ken Griffin, what was her name? Who was the there was about 5 of them. I want to see if I can pull them up before we conclude. But my point is that I have to know if we're going to have a better candidate that will be a better mayor than the one that we have. So I can't say whether or not he's going to be a one-term mayor, or certainly if I'm going to support somebody else. The way things are going now, and I am really not even, going to get on this whole Chicago Teachers Union, Chicago Public School kick. That's not just going to be where I'm going to get into this space and just say that everything is launched there and that I don't know all the nuances. I do not. I know that what I believe is that we should have a superintendent in place. We should have a person in place to establish an administration that can run a public school system and to improve that public school system, to provide a great education for our students in every neighborhood where we have public schools on the south and west sides of Chicago, that all of our students have everything that they need in order for them to get a great education. And that should not be in the hands of the mayor. The mayor of the city of Chicago, by law, let me just say it again, by law. The reason why the Chicago public school systems are headed by the mayor is because of Richard M. Daley. Richard M. Daley went to the General Assembly in Springfield and asked the General Assembly in Springfield for a temporary status to give him temporary control of CPS. Was never put in place for the mayor to permanently be in control of the Chicago public school system. I believe that Brandon Johnson should have the courage to allow for the elected school board to go into place and for there to be a chairman of that board and allow for a qualified educational superintendent who understands how to administrate a large institution like our public school here in Chicago. And the mayor should be completely out of that. The mayor should have no place. In fact, Harold Washington said, I wish I had the clip. Harold Washington said, you do not want your mayor in charge of your public education. I wish I had the clip to play it for you. But let me say this in closing. I want, and I'm going to continue, I want to make sure that we are as informed with information that will empower us to make better decisions, to empower us to determine who it is that we are going to have as our representatives in government, from education to economics. The only way that we can do that is that we have got to do several things. One, we must commit ourselves to organizing ourselves together. We have just a couple of minutes. And I'm going to go back to that. But we are in the season of Kwanzaa, the season of Kwanzaa. What are the principles of Kwanzaa? I put a post out. I put a post out a few days ago, actually on the let's see. I think I did it on Christmas. But the first principle of Kwanzaa, there's 6 principles, and the first principle of Kwanzaa is Umoja, UMOJA, unity, right? Unity. Now, It's the first principle. If we're not going to practice the first principle of unity, then there's no way that we could follow the other 5. We've got to organize. We've got to educate ourselves. We have to be much more informed, and we have to be consistent. In order to do that, we have got to organize ourselves together. All right. I'm going to see you all next week. Same time, same place, right here on intellectualradio.com for our brand new program of 2025. You all have a great night. Stay informed.